Hello, and welcome to the Reflection Pool podcast, produced by the Vernal Pool, UC Merced's undergraduate creative arts journal. My name is Memphis, and today I am joined by...
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna.
She is a student here at UC Merced, and together we're going to discuss her work published in the Vernal Pool and things around that nature. So, what's your name? What's your major? Where are you from?
So, hi, everyone. I'm Anna Zhang. 因为 Zhang. I'm a fourth-year English major, writing studies minor, and I'm from San Diego.
Oh, how do you like San Diego?
Gets hot sometimes, but, you know.
Yeah. Do you like the beach? Are you a big beach person?
Funny thing is I haven't been to the beach in, I think, 3 years.
Really?
Yes, even though I live like 20 minutes away from it. But yeah, I think at some point it just got tiring to see.
I could never. So what's your experience with the Vernal Pool? How has being published impacted you?
So my experience with the Vernal Pool is I heard a lot about it from my professors in writing and English in my first year, but I never at that time felt like, oh, maybe I should submit something. I wasn't exactly familiar with the process and how, I guess, rigorous or how, tough or not tough the editors are, if that makes sense. So it was kind of intimidating at first.
It's really interesting. So would you say you have, a positive experience?
I would say so, yeah, because that's, in my second year, I had one class where we, as part of an assignment, we were told to submit our work. So that was kind of my beginning with the relationship with Vernal Pool, and I think it was from that poem, that point that I, was like, okay, I think this is something I would like to participate in.
Did you publish consecutively from your second year to your fourth year, or was there a gap? I think there might have been a gap. I don't exactly remember it when I published that first poem, but yeah, I think most of pieces I've submitted are from classes, just because I usually don't really write with the intention of sharing it with the outside world. Yeah. Okay. So you were the contest winner from last semester's issue. Can you walk me through your writing process, or what was submitting specifically to a contest like for you?
Ooh. So, the funny thing is, I wish I could say I spent so much time just thinking about it, but I actually wrote that piece maybe the evening before the deadline because actually I kind of want to see what happens if I just throw something out there. So so luckily for me, ideas kind of come naturally, things just pop up in my head.
Wow.
So I was really obsessed with horror podcasts. There's one called Kaidan, Japanese Scary Stories. There's also serial killer, unsolved mysteries.
Are you into true crime?
Yes, I love true crime.
Okay.
But I think it was from those podcasts, and there were other ones that kind of inspired me and got me to think well, how can I start with this horror story? But yeah, I don't usually write horror, so it was a new experience as well. Wow,
that's really interesting. I think you did a terrific job on your first, I guess, try.
Thank you.
Quote unquote. It was really good. So your piece Upside Down Swing, it's kind of grotesque, but it really pulls you in. I was super into it the minute I started reading it. Can you elaborate on what it meant to you? Was it personal, or was it kind of just this is a cool, creepy story?
I think it was more the second, because I think one of the goals I had in mind was or going back to when I was just thinking about what I wanted to write about, I had this image of just something supernatural-ish and just
okay.
something grotesque and gory. I usually have a lot of like body horror in my stories, so I was thinking like what type of monster would gross me out.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking of just like this, you know, person whose body fluids have kind of like I guess drained into like the wherever gravity was pulling it, so kind of like a raindrop, as I think I described in the story.
Mm-hmm. Ooh. So what was the idea behind it? Because you did mention you really like horror podcasts and you wanted to do like a supernatural sort of effect, so specifically the sister, because I mean, spoilers if you haven't read it, although I hope you did. It really is body horror. It really is, especially when you get near the end and he sort of is describing when he sees her actually hanging down. What was the idea behind her looking like that specifically?
I wish I could say there was like a lot of significance and like really deep stuff that I had in mind, but it was just mostly like what would gross me out. I know, maybe like just all that like body fluid and like a naturalness, I suppose. But I think. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, no. Like, what specifically inspired you to make her like really sloshing around? Like her specific grossness of being really liquidy, being upside down to begin with. I can't imagine having any of like her fluids dripping on me. Like that would be disgusting, and that's gross.
I think there was also like an inspiration of just so I think I was also watching this like video on like corpses in like this like one cave. I think it was from like Caitlin Doty's channel, Ask a Mortician, but that kind of inspired me as well. And yeah, I think when I write, I like to have a lot of like sensory details, like how does something sound, how does something feel or look like, and kind of having like those types of descriptions. And for Miracle specifically, I wanted a lot of, I guess, of what the protagonist kind of saw, and yeah.
Was there an idea like behind her name? Was why Miracle specifically?
I think I was looking for something related to just like because the protagonist is like very sciencey, like, oh, I believe in science, that type of stuff. I wanted something to kind of contrast that, where Miracle, like, it's something that maybe is hard to explain from just like factual stuff. So yeah, that like contrast from the protagonist and how he views the world and how his experience kind of affected him and, you know, freaked him out because it just didn't make sense to him.
So the name, like, what's it back to Miracle, and the fact that our protagonist keeps seeing his sister has like a really interesting tie. Like, it's a miracle that he keeps seeing her. Was that the intention by it? I mean, you kind of explained that, sort of, so it's like I'm repeating the question, but...
I think a miracle and kind of like, I don't know if I would say sarcastic is the right word, but maybe like kind of like ironic, in that usually we think miracles are...
like a good thing?
A good thing, but for him it was...
like haunting.
Haunting and disgusting, and, you know...
Do we ever know who he was talking to, or like who was playing the recording? Did you have like anyone in mind, or was it just like this is for the story?
I don't think I wrote it with him kind of like saying it to anyone in mind. It was more him kind of trying to find a way to resolve his guilt, and I think guilt itself is like a big piece of
that story where maybe it could be interpreted that guilt is what is causing him to like see his dead sister
hanging upside down and haunting him, following him.
Yeah, and it also goes back to like his story telling of the other boys who killed the younger boy and how they, you know, committed suicide unexplainably, but for him, he was the only one who could see Miracle. So I think my intention was that you could interpret it as Miracle, the monster, actually existing versus the curse being truly about like the guilt that he carries.
I did not think about it like that. But I guess like that makes sense. Do you usually write fiction, specifically horror? I mean, you mentioned earlier this is your first try, but like, what do you usually write? I guess would be a good way to put that.
Yes, I do usually write fiction outside of academia, where it's all essays. But fiction, it is mostly like an escapism thing. I don't usually write horror just because it's something that I didn't really grow up with. And I guess I haven't like really delved into that genre to really, I guess, find like a personal connection to it. And yeah, I usually just write what I like writing, which is like fantasy, adventure, angst, romance.
Okay, that's really interesting. And those were things those are genres you grew up with?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
That's really cool. Do you ever write like longer pieces? Because to submit to the Vernal Pool, we have like a word limit. Do you have anything like longer that you've written?
Actually, it was a super huge struggle just to fit Upside Down Swing in only, I think, 6 to 7 pages. Usually I write very, very long stories because I'll think of like one plot point and then another plot point, and it just keeps building up, and at some point I just don't have control over it anymore because I'll see all these like possibilities, and you know, I want to include it in there and make the story, number one, appeal to myself, number two, have like reasons for everything in a plot. But yeah, usually I'll write like hundreds of pages for my stories.
Oh my god, no way!
Yeah, and there was this one instance where I think the page minimum was about like 10 pages for an assignment, and I accidentally wrote like 40-something pages because I just loved my character so much. Like, yeah, I just like them.
So is there a longer version available of Upside Down Swing somewhere?
I think I've kind of let Upside Down Swing rest in peace because, I didn't really see like a longer version of it. It was just mostly this recording of this guy and his attempt to absolve himself of his guilt. And it was created for the purpose of submitting it to the Vernal Pool, so yeah, I didn't really have like a bigger vision for it.
Oh, okay. So was this sort of almost like I guess it could also be seen as sort of like a discipline practice, like trying to, I guess, like limit yourself in a way? Because I know I struggle. When I write, I struggle making things longer. Like, I always limit myself to writing 12 chapters, and I always limit myself to writing, like, 2,000 words in a chapter. So I have to be like, okay, once I hit 1,900, I gotta close this up somehow, and then I gotta do the next one, and I gotta close it up somehow. So do you, I guess, yeah, you just said you struggled with, like, shortening things. So would you say that this was sort of, like, a good practice of being like, okay, I have to, like, limit myself because of the guidelines?
Yeah, I would say it was an excellent exercise in like concision and practicing like what's most essential for the piece and what can be cut out without, I guess, taking away from the message of it. And I think this is, like, in general, just a good way to, like, challenge yourself as a writer, and applying this to not just writing fiction or poetry, but also for, like, essays.
So there's a line that I like in the beginning, and he says, "They say on the great chain of being, the closer you are to the top of the sky, the closer you are to God. That's false." Can I ask the idea behind that line?
I think for the purpose of that line, it was mostly setting up what type of character this protagonist would be, a very stubborn and very sticking to his facts, his sciences type of, not exactly the most open-minded, or like very rooted in what he sees in his reality type of person. But I also enjoy finding ways to, I guess, hook the reader through that, where I love sentence variety and, like, in variety in length, and you can kind of see those sentences are different in how many words there are. And yeah, I just like trying to create like a rhythm through that type of variation.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely got me. I remember reading it and I remember being like, I'm excited, because I usually really like horror. Are you a fan of horror in general, or are you connected to a lot of like folklore and urban legends? Like, do you really like folklore and urban legends, I guess would say?
Yeah, I really love like mythology, folk tales, that type of stuff. Like, mostly in high school, I wrote a lot of like creation myths because I enjoy just including all these like foundational aspects of a fictional world and seeing how they kind of like create a dynamic together and build into something more complex. So like ingredients for a soup, basically. And as for the horror genre, I can't say I've really encountered any media so far that has actually scared me. I don't know how or why, but it's mostly body horror and that type of thing that gives me the shivers, but not exactly terrifies me. So I'm still looking. Do
you have any podcast recommendations?
Oh, grew up on Welcome to Night Vale, and
oh my god, me too.
And The Adventure Zone, and I really do enjoy the Magnus Archives, and so those are more like story based. As for like maybe nonfiction ones, I like serial killer, unsolved mysteries, ologies, which someone actually recommended me recently, and I love it because you get to explore all these like different topics, and that's how I've kind of also gotten inspiration as a writer, because with every new thing that I'm learning about, I'm always thinking like, okay, well, how can what happens if this is applied to it, or what if this takes place in like a fantasy world, or you know, gaining more knowledge that can help me become more well-rounded writer.
Do you like world building?
I love world building. Like, I'll be walking around campus just in my head thinking like, okay, well, what type of architecture will be in this world, and what's like the types of religions, or how is like the political system set up.
Oh, I love thinking about that.
I'm a huge fan of political intrigue and drama. Like, I watch a lot of the Chinese costume dramas where it's like the empress and the consorts kind of like having it all out without exactly like being super direct about it. So I like that, like, little manipulation types of things.
Would you say that's why your usual writing is pretty long? Because you have a big focus on like building this world?
Yeah, I would say so, because I just want the world to be believable and maybe having kind of like an explanation for everything.
Would you say that your usual fiction, not this one, is pretty long because you like world building? So you have like 40 pages of like one story, and you would say that that's long because a lot of that is like, I need to make this world believable. I need to make this like, this is a very intricate world. This really exists. I need the reader to read that and feel that.
Yeah, I think also on world building, just the length of my stories. I do want not just the world to be, as I said, believable. I also want the characters to, have a really long journey in achieving their ultimate goal, being sidetracked and this and that. And I also think it's because what I've been reading more recently is like hundreds of chapters long, so having like different arcs and different plot points, and in the end, in the climax, having everything come together and maybe resolved in a either satisfying or somehow dissatisfying way, and having these characters reach a type of like catharsis. That's mainly why all my stories are pretty long.
That leads me to my next question. Do you like reading?
I love reading, mostly fan fiction.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I have, through my, I guess, college career, more of an appreciation for different types of writing. Like, I used to not really enjoy poetry, but now I've kind of gained more of an appreciation for it, not just in its content, but how it is sonically, or how it looks and its visual aesthetics, and finding different ways to appreciate something that maybe I haven't seen in such a light before. But yes, there's just always something to be enjoyed in maybe even books you didn't like.
Do you have favorite genres? Do you have any favorite genres?
I would say I still really like romance, fantasy. I've gained more of an appreciation for sci-fi through the texts I've been encountering in class, and yeah, I would say I can enjoy all genres.
Do you have any recommendations?
A recent book I read, Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Yeah, I think that's the one that came into mind, really.
I really want to thank you for being here. Have you written anything else? Have you published anything else?
I recently wrote a chapbook. It was also for class, but I think at some point it became more of like a passion project, in which I guess after discovering like how the different poetry pieces connect together, it gave me more like inspiration and more of like a personal like, actually I really do like this, and I want to give it more of my heart and soul, I suppose.
Can you go into further detail on like what it is?
So it's like a collection of poetry pieces that center around like symbols and themes, motifs of spiders, fires and the act of like burning and being burnt, water, and the domestic. Those are kind of things I've discovered are really prominent in that collection, which it wasn't intentional. It just, I suppose, happened unexpectedly, which I suppose kind of is something I discovered happens with basically everything I write.
Nice. Okay. And are you published anywhere else? Can we find you anywhere?
I am not published anywhere else. Yeah, I don't exactly have any like social media for my writings.
That's okay, me either. Just thought I'd give you the opportunity. Well, thank you again so much for being here. This was a really good chat. I really did like reading your piece. If anyone would like to check it out, it's in last semester's issue. Literally, when you click it, it's the first one at the top. It says contest winner. And it's genuinely phenomenal. It did give me the creeps. And I hope it would give you the creeps too. But like I said, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
My name is Cassandra, and today I am joined by Kaylin Insyaraih, a published student writer for the Vernal Pool. Today we will discuss some of their work and inspiration. Kaylin, where are you from and what is your major?
I'm from Fresno. My major is English with a minor in writing studies.
Nice, nice. What made you choose UC Merced?
It was just close to home was the biggest thing, just needing to be close to my family.
Nice. So, how were you introduced to writing poetry?
I started reading poetry first a few years back after my mom had passed. When I was in high school, I started reading poetry, and then I took a class with Professor Krista Frazier. It was like a creative writing professional like intersections class, and then we started writing poetry, or like I started, and then I would like share them with her, and we started like workshopping them and things like that, and then eventually I developed like an entire collection.
Nice. How would you characterize your style of poetry?
I would say it's very modern. It like fits in with like a lot of the modern poets of like today, like Mackenzie Campbell, Lily Reinhart, like poets like that.
Mm-hmm. Your poems seem to have a theme about love. Do you utilize writing as a tool to navigate love and relationships?
That's a big question. I wouldn't say that I necessarily use it as a tool to navigate it. More so, it sort of helps me understand my own feelings. I think love is just like a universal like language, like everyone understands it. So like even if my poems aren't about love, people always somehow tie it back to that. So
looking back on the poems that you published in the Vernal Pool, there were a lot of love poems, or what I would call love poems. Are there any other types of themed poetry writing that you indulge in?
I think, well, like I said, like love is just like a universal thing. I feel like everybody writes about it. So somehow it always comes back to that. But I do write a lot about like grief and loss. Like I did lose my mom, and I lost one of my best friends. So that's like a big theme as well, like throughout a lot of my poems.
What inspired you to submit your poetry to the Vernal Pool?
The first time I had submitted, actually, it was a requirement for another writing class, and I submitted an article. And then after that, it just got easier to submit.
Nice. Have you submitted your work elsewhere?
No, I haven't. I've always meant to, but I just never got around to it. But yeah, no, I haven't.
And is there any place that you have in mind that you would like to submit to?
I've always wanted to submit to Matchbox magazine.
Nice.
That's a big one. And there's like a few like female like empowered journals type things that I would like to submit to. Yeah.
Nice. So you submitted a collection of poems that you called Star-Crossed Collection. And one of the poems that stuck out to me was Blueberries, and it speaks about first love and heartbreak. Can you share what inspired you to write this poem?
Yeah, so the Star-Crossed collection was actually a part of a bigger collection that I had written, and I wrote it about a lot of things, but I think it was like 4 poems, right? I'm not sure, but yeah, I think 4 of those
in the Star-Crossed were like at the very beginning of like because my entire collection was split into 3, and so like those 4 poems were like in the very first one, and it spoke overall, like those 4 speak about like my first experience in love. And so that one specifically is very it's very ambiguous, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not very specific in that one, and I did that on purpose. I think it was more to like it was sort of one of those things where it was like, if you know, you know. Like, there were very few people in my life who knew about that experience, and very few people that were able to point out who that was about or what that experience was. But yeah, overall, it was inspired by my first experience in love. I wouldn't say it wasn't a bad experience. It wasn't like super devastating or heartbreaking, but it was an experience that was just very new for me. Because like I think I had mentioned earlier that I lost my mom when I was in high school, so I didn't, like, love wasn't my focus from like 15 to 18 or whatever. And so I had experienced first love at an age where most people had already experienced it a few times, and so I was very new to it. And so it was just like I said, it wasn't bad, but it was an experience that meant a lot to me and like taught me a lot about myself and like what I wanted in love and in life in general.
Thank you for sharing that. If you don't mind me asking, how soon after the relationship did you write Blueberries?
A long time. Because I didn't write about it for a really long time. Like, I found it easier to write about it when the feelings had passed, if that makes sense. When like it was easier for me to go back and revisit those feelings versus writing it in the moment, just because like I said, the situation wasn't bad. It was just, there was still pain, obviously, and there was still like little inches of heartbreak, and so I wasn't completely ready to write about it, or to really, I didn't understand it until a few years later. And so I think I was 18 when it happened, and then I wrote about it when I was 21 or 20. So yeah, a few years had gone by for me to actually like sit down and write about it.
Understandable. We have to process things sometimes.
Yeah, and like I said, it was just easier to not write about it in the moment. But yeah.
Speaking about not writing something in the moment, do you find yourself, when you're writing about something that happened in your life, do you find yourself taking some time back to reflect on it, then write a poem about it? Or does it kind of depend on the situation?
Yeah, I think it depends. I hate it because whenever I am writing, I always get really scared to write about the things that I'm currently going through, just because it's harder to do that. Like, it's harder for me to feel it, if that makes sense.
It does.
Just because, like, I don't want to feel it. Like, I'm so bad with that. Like, I'm so bad with, like, just being like, no, I don't want to deal with it. I'm trying to be better about it, though, because I feel like my poems or my writing will probably be more authentic if I write about it in the moment versus like going back and like revisiting those feelings. But that's just how it happened with this collection in particular. But I'm trying to be better about it. I'm trying to write about things in the moment, but it's just hard.
Understandable.
Yeah.
And this is a question that I usually ask everyone. Do you have any hobbies?
Do I have any hobbies?
Yes.
I'm a big reader. I love reading. Let's see, I don't have very many interesting hobbies. Like, I like reading, I watch TV, I hang out with friends and family, but reading is my biggest hobby. I love reading.
And is your favorite genre poetry?
To read, no. I wouldn't say it's my favorite genre. I do like reading poetry. It's just not like my favorite genre. My favorite genre is actually historical fiction.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a first for me.
Really?
Okay. Yeah. No, that's
it's
good
interesting.
stuff.
Yeah. World War II fiction in particular. I'm super nerdy and weird about it, but yeah, it's really interesting.
I actually had a funny conversation with my sister 2 weeks ago about how she's a World War II fanatic. And
really?
She like, gave me a spiel right before bed about World War II, and her explanation was very helpful.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I feel like I can remember all of the events, you know, given that I've learned about World War II, K through 12 and beyond. I think it's important that we know these historical facts and talk about
for
them
sure. And I think because like I'm actually writing my thesis on it too, like how historical fiction like helps us understand like big world events, because like as human beings, like we need emotion attached to things in order to understand it. So like we care more about the characters in these novels than we do about the historical figures that we learn about in class, just because it's just they're relatable and like they remind us of like ourselves or of people in our lives. But
do you have a historical fiction book that you would like to recommend, or an author that you would like to recommend?
Yeah, Salt to the Sea is my favorite historical fiction book. Ruta Sepetys, who's the author of that, writes historical fiction, and she's really good. So you should check that out, because if like your sister's into it, you should definitely try it out.
For sure. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
In the future, how do you see yourself interacting with poetry?
Well, I hope to go to grad school after this semester, and so I've applied to a few creative writing programs with an emphasis in poetry. So that's going to be hopefully like a really big thing for me, like within the next few years.
Nice. And do you know, or do you have an idea of what you want your career to look like outside of academia?
I have a few things. I've always loved journalism and article writing and things like that, so I've always wanted to go into that. I've also, ever since high school, like I've always been interested in television, so like I would also like to go into that, but publishing as well, like book publishing would also be really interesting to me.
Nice. And with the book publishing, the poems, novels?
I think so, because I remember when Professor Fraser and I were looking at possibly like publishing my collection, we had looked through like a lot of agents, and one of the biggest things we noticed is that there wasn't a lot of poetry representation for agents, and so that would be something like I'd like to do, is represent poetry and like other kinds of books, but like that would be like a big thing for me.
I was speaking with, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, Samantha Tatango, who's the associate director of the writing program at our school, and she was speaking about the lack of Asian, specifically Filipino representation in writing that she encountered during her grad school. Her grad school journey, but she also spoke about how grad school has changed and that they are acknowledging that there are other writers besides like white males. So we'll see if there's a shift.
For sure. When I was
works.
filling out like my grad school applications, they asked like for diversity statements. Like almost every program I had asked or had applied to had asked for like a diversity statement in regards to like how my ethnicity like contributes to like a different perspective in writing. So I just thought it was really interesting that like that's being a thing now.
That is. We somewhat spoke about this, but I'm still going to ask, do you have any writing goals that you would like to share?
Writing goals? I think it would be really cool to be published at some point, like published. I think that would be like a long-term goal for me. But I think that would just be like really cool to just like have a published book or something like that.
Are there any last thoughts or advice you would like to give our listeners?
I think the biggest thing for me is just like learning how to not be afraid to share your writing. I have always been super self-conscious about it, like even like my essays or whatever, like I hate it when people read it, or like I don't like sharing it, but I think just overcoming that is like the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things that I think is really important.
And if you don't mind sharing, do you have any like concrete tools or advice around what it looks like to kind of get out of your own way and allow your audience to read your work?
I mean, for me, like, I just tend to, like when I submit things, like, and, like, I get, like, a letter or whatever saying that it's going to be published, I usually don't read it. Like, that sounds really bad, but, like, once it's published, like, I get really scared and I just, like, don't read it. But then, it's sort of, like, I just have that in the back of my mind that, like, other people are reading it, but just, like, learning to, like, be okay with that.
Well, thank you for coming in and letting me ask you a few questions about the writing that you're doing, the writing that you'll do in the future. I'll just ask one more time. Is there any other last thoughts that you would like to share?
Not really. I think that it's really cool that you guys do this. I think like sharing like stories from like writers is just really cool. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.